All right, good morning, everybody. It looks like everybody who's trying to log in has logged in. My name is Alan Lilly. I'm the presiding hearing officer of the State Water Resources Control Board's Administrative Hearings Office. Today is Monday, October 31st, 2022. Happy Halloween. And it's just after 10 a.m. This is the AHO's fourth day of hearing in the reference from the court, Monterey County Superior Court in RMC, City of Marina versus RMC Lonestar to the State Water Resources Control Board. It looks like we have some differences in the attorneys who are here this morning. And Mr. Anderson, if you can change the nameplate from Tim Terry to Robert Moore, he'd probably appreciate that. Looks like all the other names are correct. So I'm just going to quickly ask for the attorneys to enter their appearances again this morning, and then we'll get started. So first of all, who is appearing today? Just the attorneys to begin with, and then we'll get the witnesses as they testify. But which attorneys are here for California American Water Company?
Good morning. Bob Moore, Alan Mackins, representing California American Water.
Good morning. Happy Halloween. David Osias, also here for CalAm.
Michael, you're on mute.
Good morning, Michael Betts for California American Water. Thank you.
Robert Donlin, Ellison Schneider for CalAm.
And Catherine Horing for California American Water.
All right, and good morning to all of you. Who's here this morning which attorneys are here this morning for Marina Coast Water District?
Morning, Mr. Lilly. James Markman for Marina Coast Water District.
Good morning, Mr. Lilly. Kyle Brochard, also Marina Coast Water District.
Good morning, Your Honor. Howard Wilkins for Marina Coast Water District.
Morning, Mr. Lilly. Stina Berglund, Marina Coast Water District.
And my audio is on the same feed.
Somebody is, we're getting sound from somebody. So if you're not speaking right now, you might probably be good if you went on mute. Okay. I think Mr. Schwertzinger, we're getting an audio feedback from you, so you might want to go on mute until we're ready to have you testify if you can.
Mr. Lilly.
Mr. Lilly. Mr. Schertzinger and I, this is Ms. Mazine, are on the same audio feed today. Unfortunately, since we're in the same room, we're going to have to handle it that way.
Oh, okay. Excuse me, Ms. Mazine. I didn't realize you were trying to speak. I apologize for interrupting. So you are also here for Marina Coast Water District.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't realize you and Mr. Schwertzinger were on the same audio, but thank you for letting me know that. Okay, and who's here for City of Marina this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Lilly. Skip Spalding for City of Marina.
Good morning, Larissa Meisenheimer for the City of Marina.
Okay, and who is here for RMC? Oh, I'm sorry, was there anybody else?
Yes.
Good morning, this is Joseph Malk, also for the City of Marina.
And
okay, that's a new name, Mr. Is it? Oh, there we are, Malk. Okay, M-A-U-C-H. Great. Good morning. I think you may be. Were you here last week, or are you new for this week?
I am new for this week. Yes, Mr. Lilly.
Okay. Well, thank you. Welcome to the hearing. Okay, and then who is here for
Lilly? Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have one more lawyer today.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, Mr. Lilly. Susie Orza, also for the City of Marina.
Excuse me, Ms. Orza, I didn't mean to interrupt you before. Thank you and good morning. All right, now, excuse me, Mr. Spalding, I'm really butchering these introductions. Anybody else for City of Marina, or have we covered it now?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for interrupting. I'll blame it on Zoom. Okay, and for RMC Pacific, CEMEX?
Good morning, everybody. James Newdecker for RMC Pacific Materials.
And good morning, Mr. Newdecker. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. We did receive Mr. Wilkins' email, both the upload and the email with the revised slides for Dr. Ash, and we moved those over this morning to the HO FTP folder. Let's see here, I got a whole mess here. And so those, whoops. Am I still there? I just had a little glitch. Okay, so we did move those over where everyone can download those ultimately, and we will ultimately label those new slides as exhibit MCWD 108. And it was fine for people to upload their slides in PowerPoint format. When we are firming up the record, we will convert those all to PDF files. It just saves a lot of megabytes. The PowerPoint can be easier for displaying, but the PDF seems to be better for the final archived record. So we will do it that way. And we can cover that when we get to Dr. Ash as to the revisions. I went through them quickly. I did notice there were fewer slides than before, but we will cover what revisions were made with Mr. Wilkins. But first, go ahead, Mr. Spalding. Your real hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. I wanted to raise an exhibit issue right at the outset. You will recall that at the end of the day, Friday, Marina and other parties moved exhibits into evidence. And one of the ones that we moved into evidence was Marina exhibit number 38. And that involved two passages from the depot of Mr. Leffler. We have gone back again and reviewed that that excerpt and the preceding testimony, and we believe that there was a mistake. I think that I did not ask the question that I intended to ask. I think that Mr. Leffler didn't give the answer that he intended to give, and neither of us caught it at the time, and neither did defense counsel. So without going through a lot of explanation, I think that Mr. Leffler intended to say that there was a landward gradient, not a seaward gradient, in the dune sand aquifer during the period in question. The Q of A does say seaward gradient, and he agreed to that. But I think that there was a mistake, which may well have started with my question and kind of percolated through to the answer. So we can either withdraw that exhibit or modify it, or we can leave it the way it is, whichever way Your Honor would like to handle it. However, either way, we are not planning to rely on that exchange. We think it's fundamentally flawed, probably in 2 or 3 different ways. So I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, well, I appreciate your candor. And obviously, it's important to try to get to the truth here. Here's what I propose we do. It is better to have some kind of written documentation of this rather than just the recording. The recordings are a little harder to access. So I think it's important to leave the exhibit in because it came in, but I think it's important to get the record corrected. So what I propose, Mr. Spalding, this is what happens when you volunteer. You may have noticed now there's a pattern. When you volunteer, you get assignments. I think if you could write up a short statement just stating what you just said as far as your understanding of basically what you should have asked and therefore what Mr. Leffler should have answered. And if you want to do it, I'll leave it up to you whether it's a separate text or whether you just have a separate copy of the deposition transcript and mark it up, with then maybe a cover letter explaining what you've done. But I'd like you to do something to show what you think the correction should be. And then I'd like you to confer with Cal-Am's attorneys about that and see if they agree. And if they and you agree, then that can just be filed, and I think it'll be pretty clear on the record. So why don't let's call that Exhibit MC City of Marina 38 supplement, and we'll leave Marina 38 as is, and then prepare a supplement in whatever format you think most clearly describes the corrections that you think are appropriate, and then confer with Cal-Am's attorneys. And, I realize we're busy in the hearing now, but when you all have time, perhaps if some of you are not on the site visit, you can do it then, or you can do it sometime when we're not in hearing. And then if you can file that and you'll have something in the document that says the City of Marina and Cal-Am stipulate that this is in fact, that these corrections are appropriate, some words like that. If Marina Coast wants to be involved in that process, that's fine. I don't know that they need to. Mr. Markman or Mr. Wilkins, does Marina Coast want to be involved, or will you leave that to City of Marina and Cal-Am to resolve?
Well, I think we'll leave it, Mr. Lilly, leave it to the city and Cal-Am.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Spalding, does that, I'm a little garbled, but does that assignment make sense for a way to proceed here?
Yes, it's totally clear and we are fine doing that.
Okay, well, then there'll be a good record. Mr. Betts?
I have a procedural question, or if I may, and that is, are we doing Marina Coast Water District case today and then City of Marina to follow today, or City of Marina tomorrow? And I'm sorry if I messed it up, and I'm sorry if I'm taking up your time, but for planning purposes, we were wondering.
Oh, no, that's, I'd rather you ask so we all know. That's fine. Don't need to apologize. My plan is to do Marina Coast case today. I think I announced this before, but if I didn't, let's make it clear. We very well may finish Marina Coast case today, at least based on what I've seen. I don't think there are nearly as many, detailed questions as there were last week that I had about all the modeling work. And if we don't finish today, we will carry over till tomorrow morning. My plan is, and I think I said this before, but my plan is to start City of Marina's case on Thursday. Of course, we have the travel tomorrow afternoon for those of us going to the site visit, and then the site visits on Wednesday. And then I thought we'd start City of Marina on Thursday morning. Does anybody, and if you want, we can bring that up again toward the end of the day and see where we are today. If we wrap up Marina Coast case today and everyone thinks the City of Marina case will not take, more than whatever time left we have today, plus tomorrow morning, we can certainly do that. And then everyone would be free on Thursday and Friday. So if you can, your assignment now, Mr. Betts, when we finish Marina Coast case and everything in the exhibits are admitted, remind me again and we will revisit that. But my tentative plan was to do City of Marina on Thursday. But if everyone's ready to go and wants to, we potentially could start City of Marina's case either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, anything else for this morning procedural? We're getting started. Okay, so what I said last week when we started was, since Marina Coast case is going to be split half now and half in December, just because of the way the witness testimony ended up being filed, I said I would allow 10 minutes for a brief opening statement this morning and then another 10 minutes in December. And obviously the opening statement today should focus on the witness who will be testifying today. And just so you know, for whoever's giving that statement for Marina Coast, I did go forward last night and reread the October 12th opening brief that Marina Coast had filed. So I am familiar with the written position in that brief. But would somebody for Marina Coast like to give a brief oral opening statement this morning?
Yes, Mr. Miller, that task has been assigned to me, so I'll attempt to do that.
Okay, I hope 10 minutes will be sufficient. So please go ahead, Mr. Mark.
I'm going to make a Herculean attempt to do this in 10 minutes. And what I intend to do is to try to put this, everything we've seen and what's coming into a legal context. So I'll just launch it. And I think I can do it very close to 10 minutes.
Okay.
I think for me, this case needs to emphasize a little more maybe than it has so far, what is happening to the basin or aquifer, which is a 180, 400-foot aquifer. It's a common source of water supply to Marina Coast Water District, as well as many, many other producers. So the emphasis, I think, has to be, what is this project going to do with respect to the aquifer? Is it going to benefit that aquifer, that basin, in any particular way? Because all these water rights holders are dependent on it. And we have heard, I think there's been essentially a concession. There's going to be some negative impacts on this basin, which were characterized as negligible. And that's for the presentation of the evidence. I could dive into that, but I'm not going to. It would take way too much time. So I think examining the basin, which is Exhibit 64, MCWD Exhibit 64, there is a plan, an implementation plan under Sigma that has been adopted by 3 groundwater authorities, the county, the Salinas Valley Groundwater Authority, and MCWD Groundwater Authority. And basically, that plan identifies two sources of continuous overdraft, both 50% of the cause, according to the plan. One is overproduction, and the second is loss of storage space, which contains fresh water because, and I remember there was a talk about storage space, but basically when seawater intrudes and in its density, it occupies storage space and forces out the fresh water. So this is the way this plan looks at it. And according to the plan, since from 1944 to 2017, 10,500 acre feet a year has been lost. It has been lost storage space. And in terms of surface areas, lost storage space, the 400-foot aquifer has lost 18,000 acres as of 2015, and the 180-foot aquifer has lost 28,300 acres. The goal of the Sigma plan, in order to avoid undesirable results, is to arrest the seawater intrusion at its 2017 spatial level and push it back to Highway 1 during the course of the implementation of the plan to try to reach sustainability. And I think it will be shown to be clear that plan and that emphasis on stopping the seawater intrusion, especially don't allow it to get worse, is the antithesis of what would happen if this project proceeds. And I think the evidence will show that. I think that's a lot of the evidence and the clash of the experts and the models are all trying to get there. But we know there's damage. We know there's going to be a depreciation in the water quality. Even the brackish water already there is going to have a depreciation of water quality for the next 40 to 60 years when it's mixed with seawater. So I don't think there's any question. But I don't want to try to argue those facts to the court today, to you today, Mr. Miller. So next, think about the volume of seawater that's going to be induced by the project. I'm not sure how much of it's in addition to what might have come in before, but the pumping is going to bring in, I'll say, approximately 15,000 acre feet a year of seawater. So for the extent of the 20-year Sigma plan period, that's 300,000 acre feet of seawater being induced to come into the basin. And for 60 years, which is the project plan, it's 900,000 acre feet are going to come in of seawater, are going to be mixed in. And it's hard to understand how that could happen without some damage being done to the freshwater sources that are there, as well as the present level of water quality. If it's bad, it sure as heck is going to get a lot worse. Next thing I want to talk about as quickly as I can is the water rights part of this. First of all water that comes sitting in the basin at the time it gets into the well is groundwater. There's no other definition available to we water lawyers have been doing this a long time. If it's not in the ground, it's either groundwater or it's the underground expression of a stream going in a known and definite channel, and it's not that. So even though we've talked in the first part of this hearing about the origin of the water, what is it, fresh water, brackish water that's already in the aquifer, or seawater? That's the origin. The fact is, when it's actually pumped up, brought into the aquifer, it's in the aquifer when it's pumped and brought up to the treatment plant. So it's all groundwater. We don't have another available, and we shouldn't have another available explanation. That's what it is. Mr. Schlesinger is going to testify this morning, our general manager, and for the purpose of putting on the record the basis for Marina Coast Water District's water right, he'll testify that there's been production for a number of decades, and it's all been appropriated production used to service a retail service, a system that's now essentially aimed at serving water to 35,000 people. And that water is probably prescriptive, right? But we don't know. We can't say it's been established because there hasn't been, and hopefully won't be, a general adjudication that gets you to the point where you have to say so. But it's been adverse and notorious for decades. So I don't think, in fact, CalAm hasn't questioned Marina Coast having this water right. The more interesting question is, what's CalAm's water right? They admit they don't have one of these water rights I just discussed. They don't have overlying rights. They don't have appropriative rights. They don't have prescriptive rights. So they're looking around for another right, and they've actually come up with two theories, none of which works so far as I'm concerned, and I know none of which have case law or any other precedent. The first is a claim that they're salvaging water. Salvaged water, something that we dealt with, those of us who tried the Santa Maria case, and there's Santa Maria squarely deals with what is salvaged water. And salvaged water is water that somebody spends money to direct and cause to go into a groundwater basin that otherwise never would have happened. And so in the Santa Maria case, parties built and maintained something called the Twitchell Reservoir. And that slowed down the water that was going down the Santa Maria River straight into the ocean annually, impounded that water, and slowly released it into the river so it would percolate into the basin. It created something like 30,000 acre feet of additional water in that basin for people to produce. And the court said, since people rescued the water and paid to rescue it, they're entitled to produce that amount of water in addition to any other water that's supported by another water right. That's salvaged water. It's used in the basin. The water that we're talking about here isn't going to be used in the basin. The basin is going to be a big mixing area. That's how they refer to it. And the ocean water is going to be dumped into the capture zone where there's already brackish water. It's going to be mixed. As far as the water that came from inland, Cal-Am is going to replace that up in Castroville, where it'll never have any effect on the ongoing seawater intrusion. And they'll probably use it in lieu of pumping. But that may, so it evens out what's happening in the basin. There's no new water. There's no extra water to produce. It's going to leave some water in the basin up north, doing nothing to alleviate the seawater intrusion. The rest of the water is exported. This is the key to this whole case to me. It's exported. There's no case that says you can take a groundwater basin and use it for purposes of creating treatable water and then sending all of the water off to another base, to another basin, to another service area, Carmel in this case. That is not salvage water because it's not being put to beneficial use in the basin. That's the key to the case. It's not being put to beneficial use in the basin. The last time the state board issued an opinion on this a long time ago, 2013, on page 47, it said, interestingly, because I don't think what I'm about to read agrees with their conclusion, it said Cal-Am must show any desalinated water it produces is developed water, a new supply to the existing groundwater resources in the basin. So that, yes, salvage water to the extent it augments basin supplies is salvage water that the person who paid for can pump, just like if they imported state project water. It's not the case here. All that water is going somewhere else. And whatever happens in the basin, whatever damage, should cancel out any thought that that should happen. The other way they refer to a water right which might save them is that it's produced water, which if you hunt around for a case on what is produced water, you're going to have a hard time finding it. But basically, a produced water, the way they're referring to it, I read it as saying, this water is useless to everybody else, so we have to spend so much to treat it per acre foot. Nobody else could use it. Therefore, we're producing a use for it. And that makes it not subject to the need for another water right. So that's an interesting concept because we know most groundwater which is pumped out is treated to some degree, whether a small degree of disinfection or a large degree like treating perchlorates, or in Chino Basin, treating the nitrates in the water from all the dairy farms that have been left there. Nobody has ever said, once you reach a certain point where it costs so much per acre foot to treat water, you go ahead and do it, use it. You don't need a water right because it'll be produced water. That's never happened. We don't have legislation on that. What is that magic number of costs that would excuse you from having a water right to do that? There's no case law on it. There's no legislation on it. I say nice try on that, but that's not produced water. It could be produced water if used in the basin. If they actually took that water and treated it to some degree where it was supplied to agriculture so that the production would be relieved and the seawater intrusion possibly warded off, you might say that's produced water. That might be produced water, but this is not. Again, this is going to be exported. Quickly get to the conclusions because I'm probably running up against the 10-minute mark.
You're a little over, but keep going. You're being very efficient.
Okay, thank you. So once all the testimony is absorbed, the conclusion I think will be that CalHam has no available path by which this project could be legally validated, which is question 8, the one we're all talking about. And I think in mentioning the testimony you're about to hear from Dr. Ash, there's an interesting testimony about cutting edge technology, which fascinated me. It's almost like sonar used while you fly over a groundwater basin that can establish pockets of fresh water versus polluted water, seawater, brackish water. You're going to hear a lot about that. And that water that's sitting close to the capture zone or in the capture zone, that's going to be lost and polluted. And, you know, that's the problem. How much damage is not the question. Any damage should preclude going forward with this project. So to reiterate, there's no water right as admitted under common law. There's no salvaged water really. There's no precedent saying what treatment level or cost you can reach to call something produced water. And there's no data that has been testified to, produced by a model, that even purports to say there's absolutely no harm to MCWD or any other producer from the basin. It's negligible. What is negligible? What's negligible damage? And I would suggest any depreciation of the water quality in the basin would rule out this project's legality. And the most important thing to remember, there's not one drop of extra water from this project that's adding or augmenting the basin supply. The basin draws even if you believe in the Castroville contract, but it's not benefited by augmented water supplies. So I think you can actually say this, Mr. Lilly. I'll conclude with this. Clearly, I think this project is the antithesis of the whole idea of the Sigmund implementation plan and how it's trying to reach sustainability by stopping the seawater intrusion. I also think that we all can see, everybody can see, is the water quality is going to be made worse when the seawater meets the brackish water, which we believe it'll be shown to violate the Regional Water Quality Control Board's basin plan for quality parameters. And finally, there are cases, and we will cite them in our closing brief, that state any pollution of water, if you produce water, even if it's for an ultimately beneficial use, if you're polluting other water on the way to that goal, it cannot be considered a reasonable beneficial use of water. So the conclusion I'd suggest to you, Mr. Lilly, is as of now and when this all ends, you will agree that there is no legal glide path by which this project could be deemed to be valid under the law. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Markman. For just your future reference, to the extent it matters, I'll notice it. That was 15 minutes. But that was fine. It was helpful. I mean, I had read your brief, which I think covers a lot of these same points. But just one, this is really a very collateral point, but your brief and today you said the CalHam project water would go to Carmel. My understanding is it would go to Carmel, Monterey, Pacific Grove, and wherever else it is in CalHam service area. It's not just Carmel, is it?
Well, originally, because this was thought to supplant the supply from the Carmel River, I just said Carmel, but no, I don't suggest I have knowledge that it won't be supplied to those other places. I can tell you, we all know they're not overlying the groundwater basin we're talking about.
I'm not questioning that. It's just strange to single out Carmel. I mean, if any, I think from a population point of view, Monterey is bigger, and Pacific Grove certainly is also.
Well, I didn't mean to single it out. I like it. I think it's beautiful, but I didn't mean to single it out.
Well, I've spent a lot of time there too. My parents used to live there. And my parents lived in Pacific Grove, so I know the area pretty well. Okay, well, with that, I think we're ready to go forward with Mr. Schwertzinger. So let me get my get Mr. Schwertzinger's slides here. And Mr. Schwertzinger, I see you are there. Good morning. Will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you will be giving in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
All right, thank you. And which MCWD attorney is going to ask questions of Mr. Schwertzinger?
Mr. Lilly, this is Ms. Muzine, and I will be doing that.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just get these things kicked off here. Mr. Schwertzinger, is Exhibit MCWD1 your direct testimony for this proceeding?
Yes, I believe so.
And is Exhibit MCW89 your rebuttal testimony for this hearing?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, we will accept those as your written testimony for this hearing. And I have in front of me Exhibit MCWD 100, which has Mr. Schwertzinger's summary slide. So Ms. Muzine, do you want us to post or screen share Exhibit MCWD 100, or do you want to start some other place?
No, that would be fine. You could have the staff pull up MCWD 100. And
Okay.
I'll just note for the record, MCWD 1, Mr. Schertzinger's direct testimony also references exhibits MCWD 5, 6, 7, and 8. So he'll be sponsoring those with his direct testimony.
Okay, yeah, and that's fine. All right, let's go ahead and put up MCWD 100.
And Mr. Schertzinger, along with MCWD 100, your slide presentation, please go ahead and summarize your testimony for Mr. Lilly.
And this, Mr. Schwertzinger, you probably watched some of the hearing last week. The easiest thing is just say next slide whenever you want us to go to the next slide, and we will do that.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Lilly. Well, good morning, everybody. Mr. Lilly et al. My name is Rem Schertzinger. I'm the general manager here at Marina Coast Water District. Next slide. So a quick summary of the water district. Marina Coast Water District is a special district formed in 1960 under Division 12 as the County Water District here in what we call Central Marina. Today, the district currently serves roughly 35,000 individuals, 3 separate water services. We provide water, recycled water, and wastewater to that community. Those communities are 5 in total. The city of Marina, half of the city of Seaside, a portion of, at some point, Delray Oaks, Monterey, and then we also serve the county out at our East Garrison facilities to the east of Central Marina. We're also the groundwater sustainability agency within our jurisdiction and are charged with the Monterey subbasin for the most part. So we share that responsibility with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA as it relates to the Corral de Tierra area, which is to our east. We are predominantly focused on the Monterey subbasin to the west. And so we do that through a series of memorandums of understanding so that we could operate across the boundary in the 18400. So really there's a lot of sharing that's going on in terms of information and management between the 2 GSAs as it relates to the 18400. Next slide, please. So the district's groundwater supply, currently we're pumping approximately 3,300 acre feet a year. We do that from 8 wells, 3 deep, and the balance in the 18400. In the deep aquifer, so in the deep aquifer at the 18400, sorry. Our annual pumping from 2006 to 2020 ranged anywhere from roughly 3,000 to 4,500 acre feet in total. Next slide, please. So here we have a quick synopsis of the wells. Right now, our wells 10, 11, and 12 are all operating in the deep aquifer. This is the 900-foot aquifer. And then our wells 29, 30, and 31, these are positioned in the lower part of the 18400. And then we have well 34, which is part of our eastern set, and that is in the deep aquifer. And then well 35, also known as the Watkins Gate well, This is screened in the 400 and in the 900. So there's a boundary screening on this well specifically. Next slide, please. So this is the cover page from our urban water management plan submitted in June of 2021. Next slide, please. So this is a general overview of figure 5.2, our subbasin boundaries as it relates to the wells and our service area. You can see in general the Monterey subbasin in blue. You can also see the Seaside subbasin. And then in yellow is the district's boundary, and in, I guess you'd call that purple, is the future study area. So this is where the district is intending on and has certain indicators that there will be expansion into these spaces. As it relates to today, this figure shows you very clearly where wells, I guess you'd say 10 through 35 are. So then the next slide, please. So this is a little bit closer. So you can see that well 12, so 10 through 12, these are our deep wells. These are the wells that are closest to the CMEX site, well 12 being roughly about a mile and a half apart away. Wells 11 and 10 are in the 2 3/4 to 3 mile distance. The pocket of 29, 30, and 31, these are in the just over 4 mile range, and then beyond 34 and 35. So this really gives you a sense of which wells that are close to the ocean, the way we operate. You can see that our deep wells are the closest because they have access to fresh water in that distance from the shore. And then the pocket of our 180, 400 wells are kind of in the mid, and then 34 and 35 are clearly the district moving eastward as we try to protect our water quality, as it were. And I think that's the end of the slides.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schwartzinger. If you can go ahead and take that down, Ms. Mullen, that would be great. Thank you. Let me just shift my view over here so I can see everybody a little better. So we'll start with City of Marina. Does either or any of the attorneys from City of Marina have any cross-examination questions for Mr. Schwartzinger?
I do, Mr. Lilly. This is Susie Orza speaking.
Okay, Ms. Orza, please proceed. And I'm not sure where we are on time. I'll keep track of your time. I think we've allotted 2 hours per party for both cross-examination, Mr. Schwartzinger and Mr. Ash. So we'll see how that goes. So anyway, please proceed.
Sure, and I only have probably about 5 minutes, so I will be nice and short.
Okay. That's what all attorneys say, but maybe you'll live up to your word. I'm sorry.
I'll try to, yeah. Mr. Schwartzinger, I'd like to start by introducing myself since we haven't met. My name is Susie Orza, and I'm an attorney for the City of Marina. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Lilly, if possible, I'd like to pull up exhibit MCWD1. That is the direct testimony of Mr. Schwartzinger.
Yes, we can do that. And I just realized I may have misspoke. We'll sort out the time limits, but it's not 2 hours for City of Marina for this part of the proceeding. But anyway, go ahead.
And I'd like to go to page 4, and I'm looking at the second paragraph under A6. So towards the bottom of the page, starting with today.
Okay, we're at line 19. Please go ahead.
Great. Mr. Schwartzinger, I'd like to direct your attention to that first line there. It says today MCWD serves approximately 35,000 customers. Do you see that?
I do.
Is it true that approximately 22,500 of those 35,000 customers reside in the City of Marina?
That is true, yes.
Okay, and just looking at the next sentence here, it says MCWD serves several census tracts and block groups that are designated as communities of concern based on low-income criteria utilized by the Department of Water Resources. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the communities of concern that you are referring to here, that includes the residents of the city of Marina, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then moving to the next sentence, it says these customers are particularly reliant on the affordable groundwater that MCWD provides. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if MCWD's groundwater is more affordable than Cal-Am's groundwater?
Do I know that? I suspect that given the rate structures of both our agencies, that that disparity between the rates is indicative of the fact that Marina does enjoy a lower cost water supply.
Does it sound right to you that the groundwater that MCWD provides is approximately 1/3 to 1/2 the cost of the water Cal-Am provides?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly, if I may, I'd like to move to page 7 of this PDF, and specifically lines 4 to 5, please.
Okay, we'll scroll to page 7, line 4.
That last sentence of that paragraph provides that annual production for the years 2016 through 2020 for wells 29, 30, and 31 averaged 27% of MCWD's total water supply. Do you see that?
Yes.
And just to confirm quickly, wells 29, 30, and 31, those are all located in the 180-foot aquifer, right?
They're located in the 180, 400, yes.
Okay. Can I ask what would happen if MCWD lost the use of those wells?
Okay, well, so there's a number of scenarios depending on the gravity of that loss. So if we say that those wells were immediately lost to the district would lean heavily on its 900-foot aquifer wells to make up the balance of that supply. I think this is a little bit more nuanced a question in that 27% is the annual production, what those wells have produced, not what they could produce. So out of the total production that 29, 30, and 31 could yield, on their face, they represent 58% of our total pumping capacity. So you would be cutting off more than half of our pumping capacity, which would then force the district to rely on essentially wells 10 and 11 in the 900-foot aquifer, and then lean heavily on wells 34 and Watkins Gate.
And in doing so, would that impact cost?
Well, yes, in that the capital program would have to address the loss of 3 of our most valuable production wells, and we would have to move that production demand to some additional series of wells. For us at the district, we know those as the eastern wells, the eastern well pocket. They were defined in the 2007 capital improvement plan, which has them located further to the east.
And that's it from me. Thank you, Mr. Schertzinger.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And I'm
So
glad
that's-
to keep you on the 4-minute chain. If I have
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Schertzinger, you broke up. What did you say?
I was saying I was glad I was able to keep Ms. Horza on her 5-minute time limit.
Yeah, you get the award for promptness for this morning, Ms. Horza. Thank you. Okay, and I assume, Mr. Neudecker, you said before you were not going to have any process questions for this witness. Is that still the case?
That's still the case.
Okay, so who from which attorney from Cal-Am would like to ask Ms. Schertzinger questions?
Mr. Lilly, Bob Moore would like, but I'd like a request before that. Dr. Ash is going to testify next, I know, and David Osias is going to cross-examine. There may be some issues that come up during that testimony of showing authenticity and admissible. And so we'd like to reverse the cross-examinations and ask Mr. Schertzinger, if necessary, then, if the issue does come up, that we can rely upon his information to authenticate. We don't want to have to call him back, which we may, if if we can't do it in this sequence.
Yeah, I think Mr. Schritzinger, I'm sure will stick around. So I'd rather you do your cross-ex now. It just kind of, it's easier for me to follow the flow of thought if the cross-examination of him follows his direct. But if Mr. Osias needs to call Mr. Schritzinger back for authentication of any documents, we can do that. As you may have noticed, we're a little informal here. Usually authenticity is not at issue with these documents anyway. So why don't you go ahead with your cross-examination of Mr. Schritzinger now, subject to that understanding.
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Schwartzinger. We have met before. My name is Bob Moore. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Moore. How are you this morning?
I am fine, thanks. Let me ask you a couple things. Let's start with your CV. You've been working for Marina Coast for what, 12 months, 14 months?
18 months, yes, sir.
18 months, okay. And who did you work for before that?
I had a brief stint at Truckee Donner Public Utility District, and before that, I worked for the Nevada Irrigation District. Do you want me to keep going back?
No. I've got one question. That is, before coming to MCWD, you were unemployed, correct?
That is correct.
For 5-6 months?
5 months, yes.
Okay. Now, let me ask you another question. I asked you this as your deposition, and that is, you have listed 7 different publications, correct, on your CV?
Correct.
And I asked you, I said at the time, we're having a heck of a time coming up with those documents. And I asked you if you could send them to me. Did you ever send them to me?
No, sir, that was last week.
Did you ever?
No, we have not sent them.
Did you think you should send them before we have this hearing, that are relevant to this hearing, possibly?
No, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Lilly, I'll just object to any further questioning about these publications, which actually do not appear to be related to this hearing unless Mr. Moore would like to make an offer of proof.
Well, let me ask you this. The one publication we did have extra, your name wasn't one of the authors, correct?
I don't know. I don't know what study you have.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a little bit complicated because, as I've said before, I've told you all before, I don't really think I have the authority to deal with discovery disputes, except I have ruled that when a witness is not made available for deposition, consistent with our scheduling order, that I would not let the witness testify. But beyond that, I think the best way to do this, I mean, I know you're all professional and try to work things out, although you all are vigorously representing your individual clients. It seems like the best thing here, Mr. Moore, I'll start with you, Mr. Schwartzinger. Can you, I request that you get those documents through your attorney to Mr. Moore within the next week. And then Mr. Moore, if you think there's something in those that's going to be relevant to this hearing, we can bring that up when we reconvene in December. I don't know whether there is, and I certainly don't want to get off on collateral matters, but let's do that way. And let's proceed today with your cross-examination of him on the substance of his testimony.
And Mr. Lee, so it's clear, I have no idea. I'm not accusing him of anything except not sending me the documents. I have no idea there's anything in there that's more complicated than that.
I'm not saying whether or not you'll think anything is relevant. I think you get to read the documents first.
That's right. Well, thank you.
So go ahead.
Thank you.
Mr. Lilly, I'll just add that Mr.
Go ahead, Mr. Jean.
Mr. Schwartzinger is undertaking a good faith search for those, but as I understand it, they exist perhaps only in hard copy in his archive and date back to college or military days and deal with water treatment issues. So to the extent they can be found, I understand he will find them, get them to me, and we'll get them to Mr. Moore.
Okay, and if you can't find them, if Mr. Schwartzinger cannot find them with a reasonable search, let Mr. Moore know and give him that explanation. As I say, I suspect hope this is going to involve collateral issues that aren't particularly related to this hearing, but we don't know. So please follow that up offline, and if necessary, you can bring that back up here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Can we turn to exhibit number 79, which I think is your rebuttal testimony?
His rebuttal testimony is exhibit MCW 89. Is that what you want?
89. Yes, it is. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's pull up or post screen share, I should say, exhibit MCW 89. All right, what page do you want us to scroll to?
The second page, please.
Okay.
Now, Mr. We had to go a different way the last time, but would you say your name one more time so I don't stumble over it for the rest of this questioning?
No worries. Shirt, like what you're wearing, Zinger.
Schertzinger. Great. Thank you, Mr. Schertzinger. Let me ask you, if you can, to go down to paragraph 47 at lines 1 through 8 on page 15.
Wait. You have some other document than we have.
No, I'm sorry.
Three-page document.
Let me refer to paragraph 14 on page 2.
There is, you want to go to line 14?
I'm sorry. Yes, line 14. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, now we've got line 14 displayed. Go ahead.
Mr. Schertzinger, would you want, this line says in paragraph 47 of his testimony, and you're talking about Mr. Leffler now, correct?
Correct.
At lines 1 through 8 on page 15, Mr. Leffler estimates that only 15% of MCWD's groundwater supply occurs within an aquifer screened by the proposed WSP slant wells, referred to the 180-foot aquifer. As explained in my testimony, as stated in the MCWD 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, which is provided as Exhibit 63, MCW wells 2930 are screened in both the 100-foot and the 400-foot aquifers. You see that?
Yes.
That's a true statement.
Yes.
Then your next line is at line 19. Mr. Leffler goes on to claim that none of MCWD's supply, including the portion from the 180-foot aquifer that he estimates at 15%, will be impacted by the proposed slant well pumping. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, can you tell me what scientific background you have?
Scientific background?
Yeah.
Sir, I'm a civil engineer. So
Okay.
I guess none.
And you're now commenting and disagreeing with Mr. Leffler, correct?
Wait. Mr. Moore, so far all you've done is read the part of Mr. Schertzinger's testimony that describes Mr. Leffler's testimony. Yeah. If you want to ask about his disagreement, I think you have to read part of Mr. Schertzinger's testimony where he actually disagrees.
Well, I was asking him about Mr. Leffler's will be impacted by the proposed slant well pumping. I think there's a question I need to ask in there if I could.
Okay, well, I'll just say it's not clear to me what you were asking Mr. Schertzinger about Mr. Leffler's testimony. So I think you need to make your question clear.
All right. But any decrease, next line, any decrease in MCWD's potable groundwater supply from the desalination slant wells would be unacceptable. Explain. I'm going to ask him a question about that line, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead. So what's your question about that line?
Why do you say it would be unacceptable? What is unacceptable?
The taking of or diminishment of Marina Coast's water supply as referenced in the lines above. Mr. Leffler is indicating in his testimony that potentially 15% of the water could be MCWD's water, and we're saying that any decrease in our supply would be unacceptable. Or I am saying that.
Right. And let me ask you a question more general. Would you agree with me that any calculation or statement like that is better served or better analyzed by an expert rather than you?
Well, I think quantitatively, I would agree. I think in its broad statement, I'm merely saying, but any, and I'm using the term any as in calculation, right? I'm not specifically saying a decrease of X is untenable. What I'm saying is any decrease in MCWD's potable groundwater supply as caused by the project would be unacceptable.
Unacceptable to you or unacceptable
To
to
the
someone
district.
else? To the district,
To the
okay.
district.
And what is the number? You say it would be unacceptable. What number makes it unacceptable? 1%, 15%, 30%, 40%? Is there a number?
Not from me, sir. I would say any.
So a 1% decrease would be enough for you to say it's unacceptable,
Yes.
based on your personal opinion as a general manager, correct? Not on any scientific basis.
Correct. I think that, to your point, if the scientific part of our organization and of others would have to identify that Marina Coast water was in some way taken or decreased in its quantity or ability to be removed, that any would then be active, right? It is not incumbent upon me to determine how much water is being taken out of the system. That's for the experts, to your point.
So your testimony is simply any amount of decrease for available water, not your water, but available water would be enough that you said it's unacceptable.
Well, I wouldn't shape it that way. I would say my point is any decrease in MCWD's potable groundwater supply would be unacceptable.
And then you say, loss of MCWDs, I'm sorry, I'm on line 23. Current supply sources in the 180 foot aquifer would leave over 5,000 of its constituents without water using Mr. Loeffler's estimated percentage, right?
Correct.
Now, when you say loss of MCWD's current supply sources, you're talking about the loss of all their supply sources, correct?
Correct.
So everything had to shut down and you were getting no water from any of the wells, correct?
Well, I think it's a little overbroad. Maybe the sentence doesn't quite get to the point. The point that I was trying to make here, Mr. Moore, is that using the simple 15% percentage of loss, that if we apply that to the population, roughly 5,000 people wouldn't have access or wouldn't have the ability to draw on what is essentially their right to water. If it doesn't convey that totally, I can understand that. It's a little, I was trying to be illustrative.
And you were. My question though is, I think what you said was a loss of all of the water source.
Mr. Moore, it doesn't say that. It says loss of the supplies in the 180 foot aquifer. It doesn't say loss of all water sources. So I think we need to rephrase the question.
Well, he answered the question initially I asked just that. He meant all the supply. And if it's confusing, Mr. Schwarzenegger, was it all the supply or just the supply in a 180 foot aquifer?
Well, so the point here is that it's only the water in the 180-400. That's what Mr. Loeffler is referring to. So
I'm sorry, and that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
And that, so what your hypothetical is that aquifer just shuts down completely.
Well, I don't know that it shuts. Well, okay, so shuts down is not the right term, right, Mr. Moore? I think that these wells would, if these wells will not go dry. I think we all have to understand that they will become saltwater intruded, or in this scenario, they won't go dry.
So what scenario are you referring to? I'm sorry.
If the seawater intrusion boundary moves eastward significantly as a result of this project, which is essentially what is proposed in this scenario, then those three wells are no longer effective at delivering potable water supply, which they are doing at the moment. And if they cannot deliver their potable water supply, then we have to go to another source. And so my point here is only that of the 35,000 people, that 15% loss would essentially mean that 5,000 individuals inside the community, their water supply would have been diminished in the 18400. How's that?
I'm trying to understand that with your testimony before, but I'll move on.
Okay.
Let me go to the next question, which I have. Let me think a second. Excuse me, just a second. Bring it back. Let me have you turn, if you would, to the next page. I think it's page 3.
All right, we'll scroll down. We have exhibit MCWD 89 on the screen, and now we're on page 3.
Let me go to you. Let me start at, excuse me, the page before line 27. Start 27. If impacts from the slant well pumping.
Wait. You Miss Mon, he's back on page 2, so scroll up.
Yeah, I said that.
Sorry, we'll scroll. There we go.
Yeah.
We have line 27 displayed from page 2. Go ahead.
If impacts from the slant well pumping work are not confined to the 180-foot aquifer, other portions of MCWA supply could also be in danger. You see that?
Yes, sir.
Have you heard any expert testify in any proceeding that there's a danger to the slant wells to something other than the 180-foot aquifer? Or is that something you just thought about?
No, sir. Actually, so recently the Salinas Valley Basin GSA released its preliminary results regarding the deep aquifer studies. And some of their findings show that there is a potential cross connection between the 400 and the 900-foot aquifers. And that inside what they call, I think it was zone 4, there could be cross connection. And so that line is really about if the 18400 is compromised by overpumping that groundwater basin, the 900-foot aquifer, which is already in decline, could be affected by the groundwater aquifer above the 18400. And so it is of great concern to the district that the wells 10, 11, and 12 could be potentially affected by a corruption of the 18400.
And how would that corruption take place? As far as you're concerned as not expert, how would that occur?
So the experts are saying that there's 2 ways to do that. Either the aquitard that stands between the 18400 and the 900 has there are places where it has voids in it and would start to communicate more directly as we overpump in both. The other is abandoned well casings or cross-connected well casings that would allow water from the 400 to drop down into the 900. So we could see this happen so the scenario is that as the 18400 begins to be compromised, and as I mentioned earlier, we shift away from our wells 29, 30, and 31, and we shift onto our wells 10, 11, and 12, and we start to draw harder on the aquifer below, that differential would actually cause, I don't have a right word, cause the boundary between them to be compromised, and would start to communicate between the two aquifers. That is coming out of the deep aquifer study at the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin GSA.
Let me read you a question and answer at your deposition.
Sure.
Starting with, yes, you're right, at line 8 on page 44. So recognizing that the operation, oh, excuse me, so you're right. So recognizing that the operation of MPWSP as well as Marina Coast wells, especially 29, 30, and 31, there could, given the dynamics that are within the space, there could be a situation where the demand for both systems plus ag would cause this percentage, Mr. Lafler's percentage to increase.
It probably would help, Mr. Moore, if we post or screen share this deposition. So this is the Schertzinger deposition?
At page 44, that's right.
Okay, I hope we have that one in our file. Ms. Mullen, can you see if we have the Schertzinger deposition transcript? Okay, excellent. And we'll go to page 45. Okay, now tell us, it's just easier for me, Mr. Moore, if we have the out here. So tell me what line you'd like to go to, please.
Yeah, I started at line 9.
Okay, so we'll scroll down to line 9. All right, now go ahead and read your question again, but a little bit more slowly so we can follow along, and Ms. Mullen will scroll down as necessary.
Let me see where I want to start then. Okay, your answer above is okay, Bob. I believe what you're asking is.
All right, let's wait. If you're up above, let's scroll up so we can read it. I just want to see what you're reading.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I apologize. Are we on page 44 or 45?
Oh, okay. We're on 45. Should we be on page 44, Mr. Moore?
That's right.
Okay, let's go up to page 44. That'll help. Okay, now tell us where you want us to be.
Let's start with 1. It'll set up the question and answer.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. You're answering. Okay, Bob, I believe you're asking is in what situation does this broaden into a broader category, or how it does what is envisioned by the statement? By me, yes, you're right. So recognizing that the operation of the MPWSP as well as the Marina Coast wells, especially 29, 30, and 31, there could, you start given the dynamics that are within the space, there could be a situation where the demand for both systems plus ag could cause this percentage, Mr. Leffler's percentage, to increase. That's modeling that's beyond me. So you made this statement, but you really don't have the information or the statistics to back it up. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Yeah,
that's why it's future based.
Yeah.
And that's true of most of your statements, isn't it?
Yes.
It is. So when you're offering an opinion like you've offered in a number of situations, that statement applies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You don't know the background, right?
The background of what?
Well, the background and statistics that back up what you've been saying to that.
Well, I'm only saying that based on the information that I have, based on the reports that I've read, that prognostication, that's the best I can do as the general manager, right? That's my job, is to look at these reports and chart the course of the district.
And again, I'll remind everybody, you're not purporting for a second that this is any kind of expert testimony, correct?
Correct.
And everything you've said so far, you'd refer to an expert to actually answer the question, not you.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore.
I botched it.
Just keep track of my time here. Excuse me. So I calculated that was about 25 minutes. Okay, so Mr. Schertzinger, I do have a couple of questions for you. First of all, are you aware of your district having conducted or had conducted for it any pump efficiency tests on any of the well pumps?
So I'm aware that we have done efficiency tests at each one of our maintenance events. So when we do the maintenance event, we test the well for delivery, we do the maintenance event, and then we test it again. My understanding that 10 and 11 were done within the last 5 years. 9 is slated to be done, or sorry, 12 is slated to be done this year. I don't know, and I think we've done something at 29, but I'd have to go and find out. I don't know about any of the others.
Do you know what the results of those were as far as what the percent efficiencies were that were determined for the well pumps for 10 and 11?
Not specifically, sir, no.
Do you know about the pump efficiencies for any, regardless of when the tests were done, for any of the MCWD wells?
No. I'd have to go get that information.
Okay, is that information you could get?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well, I'll see if I think I need it. And then what do you know what cost in terms of dollars per kilowatt hour the district pays for the electricity it uses to operate the well pumps?
Only our general bill. So I'd have to pull it out of our general PG&E bill. We have, I think, roughly over 50 accounts, but on average, Alan, we're paying about $100,000 a month.
Okay, well, that doesn't really help. I need the dollars per kilowatt hour for my interest. So, but I assume that's, or the cents per kilowatt hour. I assume that's something else you could get if necessary. Yes. I probably will ask you to follow up on that. So, and beyond that, related or different question, what is the maximum total dissolved solid level that the district will use from its wells? Or said another way, if the TDS level in a well goes above a certain number and the district has to shut off the well, what is that number, that maximum acceptable TDS number?
Okay, well, okay, so this is a little nuanced, right? So this is a secondary contaminant. So we set the TDS at 1,000, but the consumer, what is it, the EPA and DWR. So Title 22 tells us that it should be around 500. We're operating in the 400 range right now, as identified in our CCNRs. And so I would say that once we hit the 500 mark, which we've accepted, I guess, internally as the organization, that 500 milligrams per liter is the leading edge of the saltwater intrusion. At that point, we would start to blend very heavily from our eastward wells to try to keep that TDS in the system down. It is at 1,000, that's the upper limit, and then we have a short-term limit set by the state at 1,200 milligrams per liter. But once we cross it's my understanding, once we cross the 1,000 milligrams per liter, then there's other permitting issues and expansion issues for the district between us and the state.
Okay, and all those are TDS numbers, is that correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so that does lead to another question. Does the TDS of the water pumped from the various district wells vary quite a bit?
Actually, no. So it's pretty consistent.
Okay, so for all the wells, it's I think you said 440 if I wrote that down right. Is that about
right? It ranges from, what is it, 400 to, yeah, I'd have to go check. I think that the CCNRs have it, Mr. Lilly. I want to say it. And that's an average number that I'm giving. But yeah.
Okay. Let me just read my notes here. Okay, so from my reading of all of the exhibits and testimony from Marina Coast, from you and Marina Coast other witnesses, it appears that the two types of impacts from the CalAm slant well project that the district is concerned about are, number one, of course, water quality impacts, which you've described. And number two, potentially, I'll call it pumping lift impacts. If the water level in the well goes down, there would obviously have to be more pumping lift. Aside from those two types of impacts, are there any other types of impacts that you're aware of that CalAm's slant well project could have on the district's wells?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I don't, right? Because your pumping lift is a yield issue, right? So we would lose, so you're going to lose yield, increased cost, and water quality concerns, right? Those are essentially the general concerns around the well and its ability to perform.
Okay, I mean, that's all I could see. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Okay, I think it would be useful if you can work with your attorney to the things I would like to know, if you can just search the district's files. And I realize the district probably has a lot of files, but I would like to just know if there are any pump efficiency tests for any of the wells. So if you can work, I assume Ms. Mazine, you're the person, if you can work with Mr. Schwartzinger to see if those are available. And then also, I certainly don't want to look at all of the district's PG&E bills, but if you can just give us some idea of the recent cents per kilowatt hour that the district is paying, I think that would be useful information. Okay. And then the last one is, you said you would have to check, but I would like just a little more detail on the TDS levels. By current, I realize there's some fluctuations, but over the last year or so, if you can just tell us what the TDS levels are from either well by well, or if they're all in the same range, just what that range is. I would like to know those numbers. So I rambled on a little bit, but can you get information in those three areas? It's efficiencies, electricity cost, and TDS. And we'll see. I think you might, Ms. Mazine, why don't you see if you can just send those documents to us. We might not need to, and of course, send them to the AHO and CC everyone on the service list. We'll see it, and I may mark them as an AHO exhibit since I'm asking for those. And then if we need to, we can follow up with questions in December. But I don't think this is going to be an area of great controversy. I'm just looking for some numbers. So I'll add that we're getting a list of assignments, but that's now an assignment for MCWD. So thank you, Mr. Schertzinger and Ms. Muskin for that. So those are the only questions I have. Let me I'll tell you what, so we don't have to stop the flow of things now. Ms. Muskin, is your real hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Quick question. By what date would you like to see those materials, Mr. Schertzinger, is trying to get? Is it reasonable to get, I was going to specify a date in my follow-up letter, but I'll say by the end of next week. So we're October 31st. So by November, I think that's November 11. If that's reasonable, Ms. Musine, November 11? That'll be fine.
Yep.
If it turns out you have to dig and can't get them that soon, let me know, but try to do it by then. I'll probably, and then the other housekeeping matter for Mr. Moore, following our normal practice, I would like you to work with your staff to copy the cover page of Mr. Schertzinger's deposition, and then the pages you asked him questions about, which I think were 43 and 44. And we'll mark that as the next CalAm exhibit and put that in the record. And when we get to exhibits at the end of this round of the hearing, we'll ask if there are any objections to having that go into evidence. So can you do that, Mr. Moore?
Certainly.
All right, thank you. So with that, and I don't want to interrupt now. I don't know if my staff will have any questions, but I'll check during the lunch break. And if they do, I'll just circle back to Ms. But with that, Ms. Musine, do you have any redirect questions?
I have no redirect, Mr. Lilly. Just one question. May Mr. Schertzinger turn off his camera and stay on mute and, so to speak, step down from the virtual witness stand unless you need to recall him?
That's fine. Yeah, just be available, Mr. Schertzinger, but you don't have to be on camera. You can relax unless we call on you again, in which case I'll ask you.
Thank you very much, sir.
But that's certainly fine. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, we haven't had a break, but we started at 10. I'd like to go ahead and get started. First of all, which MCWD witness is going to present the testimony of Dr. Ash?
I'll be presenting Dr. Ash.
Okay. I'd like to go ahead and get started with that. Is that all right with you, Mr. Wilkins, if we get started with that?
It's fine with me. I just wonder if Mr. or Dr. Ash needs a break before we start. If I don't.
Yeah, let's do that. That's fair. That way I can assemble all my papers too. So let's take a break until 11:30. That'll be about 8 minutes. And then we'll start with Dr. Ash, and I'll ask my staff to be getting the revised slides, which I think we're going to mark as MCWD 108, are ready to go. So with that, reminder to everyone, if you don't want people to hear you while you're talking during the break, turn off your microphone and your camera, but don't log off, and we'll all come back at 11:30. Thank you. Okay, we'll wait 1 minute for everybody to get back.
Mr. Lilly, I think you got the host has my video blocked for some reason. I can't.
Oh, no.
Maybe it's to ease your eyes, if you get it.
Well, that could be, but we wouldn't do that on purpose. Mr. Anderson, there you go.
Okay,
You're back.
Thank you.
Anyway, we're now ready to go. All right. So, Mr. Wilkins, are you ready to proceed with Dr. Ash's testimony?
Yes.
All right, Dr. Ash, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you will be giving in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And is Exhibit MCWD 4 your written direct testimony for this hearing?
Yes.
And is Exhibit MCWD 91 your rebuttal testimony for this hearing?
Yes.
All right, so I will accept those as your written testimony for this hearing. Mr. Wilkins, as we discussed on Friday, you've submitted a revised set of slides, which we're going to mark as Exhibit MCWD 108, which will supersede Exhibits MCWD 101 and 102. And first of all, just to clarify, are there any new slides in this new file, or is this just a subset of the slides in the prior two exhibits?
My understanding is it's a subset, but Dr. Ash would need to explain that.
Okay, Dr. Ash, I assume you're aware that you previously submitted two files with your slide presentations for this hearing. Are you familiar with those two files?
Yes.
And we now have I'll say a shorter file that just has some slides, which we've marked as Exhibit MCWD 108. Are there any slides in Exhibit MCWD 108 that were not in Exhibits MCWD 101 or 102?
Yes.
Okay, which ones are the new? Can you just tell us by number which ones are the new slides?
It would be slide 27, 28, 29.
Okay. All right, I'll tell you what, let's do this.
The reason for the slide difference is I saw last week that you had the witness, Mr. Crooks and Mr. Leffler do a summary. And so then I was wondering if I was going to do a summary, because the two files of slides you had come from the direct testimony and rebuttal testimony. But then I asked if I'm doing a summary today. And I thought there'd be a lot more slides than I had time to do summary.
Okay, when we get to those, we can follow up. And I'm not sure what it is. I think you have a voice activated microphone, but at least for me, you're breaking up, and I certainly want to be able to hear every word. So
yeah, sorry.
That's much better. So, and actually, maybe I did not quite hear that. So could you just explain what you did to make the new slides 27, 28, and 29?
I saw last week that Mr. Crooks and Mr. Leffler and Mr. Durbin had summaries before they started their testimony. And so I was wondering if I was doing a summary. So I asked Mr. Wilkins if I'm doing a summary today. And he said yes. And then I said, how much time do I have? He said about 30 minutes. And I said, I have a lot more slides than 30 minutes. So I need to cut down on it to get a summary in 30 minutes. So then I put together the two slide 101, I barely remember them, the direct and the rebuttal together into one slide deck. And then I added a couple more that are from another exhibit to make 32.
Okay. I think it's good you've let us know about that. I don't know if that's going to be a problem or not. So we'll see.
I'll bet the 3 slides are from the original direct testimony.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. And again, you are still breaking up some. I'm not sure why. I don't think it's my computer. I think it's yours. So,
I'm known for that. I'm sorry.
All right.
That's why I'm actually talking close to the computer, because I could try putting in my headset. That also breaks up.
Okay, well, just, I think the main thing is look at your computer and speak up because we definitely want to hear you. So with that, Mr. Wilkins, do you want us to just go ahead and screen share?
Mr. Lilly, this is Mr. Osias.
Yes, go ahead.
If you recall, Cal-Am at least reserved on Friday any objection it might have to the slide deck until we saw it. I just heard the colloquy. I wasn't able to determine that there were new slides, so shame on me. But I did notice that the slides had changed. So I'll just use as an example, mine are unnumbered, but the third slide in, the one, so if the first one's his name and the second one's the picture of the helicopter, the third one in, okay, I'll just use that as an example. The former slide deck just had the picture. This new slide has language in quotes added, and they're in quotes. So if I can get an offer of proof from Mr. Wilkins or someone that the quote is lifted from his direct testimony, then I view it as a combination slide. It's new in the sense it wasn't in the old deck, but it's not new info. Is that what the quotes mean?
Mr. Wilkins, why don't you go ahead and answer that question? Maybe we can get through this pretty quick.
I am not going to be able to answer that question. It was my understanding that all the slides were taken from his direct and rebuttal slides. So Dr. Ash will have to explain that.
Okay, so where we have in slide 3 where there's a quote, what is that quote from?
That quote would be from the direct testimony in most cases. In some cases, it could be from the 2017 Airborne Report or the 2019 Airborne Report. But I think in most cases, it's from the direct testimony. And
okay,
what I figured was if I'm doing a summary versus the direct testimony, I should make a summary.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. The one thing that sure would help me and probably everybody else is, and you don't have to do it, you can't do it right now, but where you have quotes like that, it really would help us if you have a citation so we know where the quotation comes from.
That's fine.
So and I don't know if this is going to be a problem when Cal-Am conducts its cross-examination, but otherwise I will ask you to work with Mr. Wilkins to prepare a revised version of this exhibit that where there are quotes that list what the source of each quote is.
I could probably provide that by tomorrow.
Yeah, and not just the exhibit number, but the page within the exhibit number so we can all find it. So, okay. So with that, Mr. Osias,
I just wanted to ask as he goes through it, if he can comment on which ones are changed. Just say this one's changed. That would be helpful for us. We prepared cross, as I mentioned on Friday, on the old slide deck.
Yeah.
I was expecting it to just have deletions. It doesn't. We'll cope. I'm not objecting at the moment. I just would like to know which ones are changed. And I might need a few more minutes when he finishes to see if it affects my cross.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if to the extent you can do that, Dr. Ash, that would be helpful. I realize this is all sort of last minute, but I do want to try to keep the hearing going forward. So I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get started. Well, actually, maybe we can do this that will facilitate that. I think we're pretty close to ready for a lunch break anyway. So let's plan to come back at 1 p.m. And between now and then, Dr. Ash, and you can work with Mr. Wilkins as necessary, but if you can go through and at least tell us in your new slides which ones are new, and if it's just, I had this figure in my old slide, but I've added text, that would be good. If you can tell us where the text comes from, that would be even better, but that might be asking a lot to do in 1 hour and 20 minutes. But at least tell us where they're new, because Mr. Osias does have a point that he was going off your old slides, which he didn't get the new ones till today. So that would just help him. I assume, Mr. Osias, you're going to do the cross-examination of Dr. Ash for Cal-Am?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
and I will say, Mr. Wilkins did send them yesterday evening.
Yeah, I saw the email came through yesterday evening, so which I'd asked him to, and he did. So thank you.
One question,
Through
Mr.
this,
Lilly?
but let's try to be cooperative if that will work for you, Dr. Ash.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On some of the slides, I condensed it from 2 slides to 1 slide. For instance, the borehole logs they were on 2 separate slides. I put them on 1 slide and saved space.
Yeah. Okay, so then you can just say that. I condensed these 2 slides into 1 new slide. That would be fine. And I do, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I do appreciate you're trying to make this so we can go faster than we otherwise could. So before we take our break, Ms. Muzine has her hand up. Go ahead. But you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Can you hear me through Mr. Scherzinger's mic?
Yeah, now we can, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I don't want to jump out of line here, and Mr. Wilkins may know more than I do about this, but I do believe that on the fresh slide deck for Dr. Ash, the bottom right does reference the testimony and page number, where the quoted material as well as the figure, or the quoted material comes from. I could be mistaken, and I Mr. Wilkins to jump in if I'm out of line there.
That could save us all a lot of time.
Science is looking for it, and what you were looking for, Mr. Lilly, may already be there.
I don't know that that's true. I will confirm over the lunch break. My understanding is we did that on the original slides, and that is where the figure comes from. I don't know if the text will exactly match or not.
Okay, well, why don't you sort that out, Mr. Wilkins? There's certain. Thank you, Ms. Muzane. Your eyes are younger and can read better than mine, but I now notice the fine print in the lower right-hand corner, so I appreciate that clarification. Okay, so Mr. Wilkins, do you have your assignment for the lunch break pretty clear now?
I do, and I have one thing I want to raise before we go to lunch, so there's no surprise.
Go ahead.
And so on Dr. Ash's testimony, MCWD 4, one of my questions to him is, do you have any corrections or changes to your direct testimony, Dr. Ash?
Yeah, go ahead and answer that now. That would save us some time later.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead and tell us what those are.
I was reviewing it last week on Thursday or Friday morning, and I found an error. Like on page 66, lines 10 to 13.
Okay, we can go ahead and put that up on the screen here, but it's good to take care of this now. We'll get exhibit MCWD 4. Exhibit MCW 4, page 66. Just give us a moment. We'll put that up there.
PDF, page 66.
And what line should we go to?
Line 10.
Okay, and tell us what the correction is.
So line 10 to at the end of 13. These 4 sentences are not accurate and should be removed.
I'm sorry, again, you broke up. These 4 sentences are what?
The 3 sentences are not accurate and should be removed.
So you want us to it's just one sentence between line 10 and line 13.
No.
That's like
No, there's 3
Oh,
sentences,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Lilly.
2 sentences.
No, there's 3.
Oh, if you can't count, okay. So you want, I see, I'm sorry, you're all faster than I am. So you want us to just delete those?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that is noted for the record. The sentence that begins on line 10 through the sentence that ends on line 13 toward the right side where it said, but that isn't the case for MW1. That's correct. Any other corrections?
No, that's it.
Okay, so are we now ready to take our break?
I just wanted to, before we take the break, for him to confirm, does this change the substance or any other portions of your direct or rebuttal testimony, Dr. Ash?
No.
Okay, good. So as a reminder, for the lunch break, you have to totally log off because we have a different recording session in the afternoon. So let's do that. We should be ready to go promptly. We'll start the clock running. I won't count all this preliminary discussion against your time, Mr. Wilkins. I think I'd said 45 minutes total for Mr. Schwartzinger and Dr. Ash. We'll have to see. Mr. Schwartzinger was, I think, about 10 minutes. So if you can try to, he was fifth. Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't know if I wrote that down. I don't know if anyone else. I'll figure it out. It's about 10 minutes. So Anyway, if you can try to keep it to about, well, 45 minutes max and a little less would be preferable. That would be good. Mr. Wilkins, is that going to be acceptable?
I believe so.
All right. So with that, we'll be ready to kick off and go promptly at 1 o'clock with the slides of Dr. Ash and his testimony. And as I say, Dr. Ash, I still am having a little problem with your microphone breaking up. So if you can test with Mr. Wilkins when you're talking with him, obviously I want to make sure we all want to hear every word you say. So
I'm sorry.
we'll do that. Okay. Anything else before we sign off for lunch? We'll be back at 1 p.m. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.